Hey everyone, Rob B here with Rob D, and of course you are listening to the Property Podcast. It's episode 192. This week we're looking at our own deals. Some good, some not so good, but loads of lessons.
Yeah, I've said it before on the podcast, but I do occasionally have people coming, sort of talking to me at meetups and saying, so do you have property yourself? Which I always find really funny because it would be bizarre to spend 192 episodes talking about it, but actually not be involved in it. So in this episode, yes, we do property deals or try to in some cases. And that's what we're going to be talking about. And it's not going to be bragging. In some cases, it's definitely not going to be bragging. It's just going to be talking about what we're up to out of interest and sharing any lessons, good and bad, that we have taken away from those. Because however something goes, whether it goes brilliantly or whether it goes badly, there's always something you can learn. And with every deal you do, you learn more. And hopefully you don't make the same mistake twice. So that's coming up. There's also no prizes for guessing our news story. But first, have you got a teaser, Rob?
I don't know if it's a bit early, but one of our biggest requests, and no, not autographs, kidding. Actually, our biggest request is, do you know a good accountant? So people ask us for good mortgage brokers that we can recommend. We can do that easily. We can recommend a good letting agent, Yellow Lettings. We can recommend lots of things. But one thing we've really struggled to give a wholehearted endorsement for are accountants that with property experience. So we've been speaking to many, and we're hoping, and again, there's nothing signed, sealed and delivered, and there's more research to be done, but we're hoping we'll have a solution soon. We know it's a massive pain point for property investors, so hopefully, just hopefully, we'll have news soon. Maybe, not talking weeks, might be still months, but property's a long-term thing. Hold on a little bit longer, and we might have an accountant we can recommend. So stand by for that one. Possibly the biggest news in the world this week, Rob.
Yeah, just about. Although trying to edge it out, a certain election in the US. And I think now's the time to be smug. I had a tenner on that before he was even the nominee. So there you go.
Really? Well done. What can I ask? What odds you got for that?
It was only tens or something. It wasn't as good as you might think. But still, the smugness is worth more than any amount of money.
Smugness, the bragging is well worth it. Yeah, well done.
I hasten to add, not smugness because I think he's the greatest guy in the world, but it's just the way I saw it. I thought I would see it going. And yeah, it's been an interesting week seeing pretty much everyone having a meltdown about it. But what is the effect over here? Well, pretty much what? Nothing?
Yep, keep calm, carry on. I don't think much will happen. Shares actually rose on the day he was elected, which is quite funny because I messaged Rob in the morning and said, right, could be a time to buy more. And we were very disappointed the market didn't crash. Probably shouldn't say that. But we like opportunities, and an opportunity didn't come off the back of the election. But there we go. We've got the Donald. We'll see what he does in 4 years. You never know. We might get Michelle Obama in 4 years, and that's quite exciting. I might put a tenner on that, Rob.
Do it now.
I've got a feeling she'd be a slightly better leader, but we'll see. But I can't see him lobbing nukes around, and if he doesn't, then I'm sure we'll be all fine. And as for the UK property market, don't think it affects it at all. So as far as the property podcast is concerned, we move on to a more interesting topic, at least for us, which is about ourselves and our deals. And hopefully you'll learn a lot more from it than focusing on the Donald.
Exactly. Focus on what you can control, not what you can't. So with that in mind, why don't you kick us off, Rob, and tell us a little bit about your first deal?
Okie dokie. Well, I mentioned this one a few weeks ago now and I just reserved it. And this is a property in Bradford. It's a one-bed apartment. It's a conversion. It's a beautiful building that's being converted into apartments. Very, very visually pleasing on the eye. That's not why you invest, though, but that's a nice tick in the box. The reason for investing is multiple, really. One, Bradford, I think, can see a lot of upside in terms of growth. It's one of those areas that didn't have the best reputation, but there are other areas that haven't had the best reputation in the past that have really changed and improved dramatically. And I think Bradford is well placed for that. A lot of the big projects and plans that were shelved after the '08 crash have now come through or are starting to come through. So the Westfield Shopping Centre is now open this year. Opened by Alexandra Berg. Very impressive. And that alone has made a big, big difference to the city centre, but also its proximity to Leeds and Northern Powerhouse. So this deal I was very excited about because Bradford is great, but this is right bang in the centre of Bradford. It's pretty much opposite the train station, which has direct trains to Leeds in under half an hour, well under half an hour. And also the Westfield Shopping Centre is next door as well. So in terms of location within the city, it's absolutely bang on. As I say, impressive looking building, but probably most impressive, Rob, is the numbers on this one. And I invest for a few different reasons. Sometimes I look for really prime stuff, and then sometimes I look for secondary growth stuff. And Bradford, I feel, is one of these areas that will benefit from the ripple effect, and the prices haven't gone yet, but will do in time because of Leeds and the surrounding areas. But what you do get when you go into these areas, if you're a bit braver and venture into these places, is a very good deal. Well, you should do anyway. So the value of the one bed is probably about 85 to 87, depending on who you ask, there or thereabouts. And purchase price, got it for 66k. So 85 down to 66, quite happy with that. And rent all day long at 525. Got quoted bigger numbers, but of course you have to take that with a pinch of salt sometimes. So 525 I think is safe. So the ROI, as you can imagine, is very impressive, double digits and some. And most importantly, I think the capital uplift on this property is huge, potential at least anyway. You know, at 66k, it's not hard to see that being double in the medium long term. You know, that property being 120k in the not very distant future doesn't really intimidate many people, I would imagine. So I think a lot of potential uplift there. Place for people to look out for, Bradford, is one to watch. But while you're investing there, or if you do decide to invest there, rents are very good, or the returns are very good. So that's the numbers, Rob.
Yeah, and I think you're quite right. It's hard to see a lot of downside there, and potentially a lot of upside, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? Protect your downside and and hope for the upside, and an educated hope, of course, seeing the case for it rising, which you can. I think there's an important point in there as well about secondary locations, because Bradford has not got the best of reps, as you know. And from my adventures in bridging land, I know that there are some projects there that have struggled to get funded. And also, if you look in auction, you see a lot of stuff coming up in Bradford and often not getting sold. But the stuff that is going into auction and struggling, it's all the quite knackered looking terraced stuff on the outskirts. It's not the central new conversion. And so when you're going to secondary areas, I think it's really important to get the location right. And this is why I bang on about people sort of say, oh, you know, where should I invest? Should I invest in Birmingham or should I invest in Leeds? It's like, well, it probably doesn't matter that much. What matters is the location within there. And I think that's even more the case with secondary areas, because if somewhere is on the up, then it's going to be the best stock and it's going to be the most central stuff that performs best. And yeah, maybe the more marginal things will get there in the end. Maybe it won't get there at all. Unlike in London, where pretty much anything will eventually get improved. That's not necessarily going to be the case with places that are a bit more secondary. So what you've done seems to me like the smart thing, which is go into somewhere with a lot of upside and picked the type of property that's going to have the most upside. It's going to benefit first and most when that happens.
Really, really important point. And thank you for making it. That's why we do it together, Rob. The really important thing from that is I mentioned Bradford. And if you hadn't come in then, there might have been some people who just went Bradford straight on Rightmove and started looking for the cheapest properties. And that's a really important point, that if you do go to secondary areas, go to the best places within the secondary areas, the places that should go up first. So super important point and lesson.
So that's the deal. That's the numbers. Where are you up to with it now?
Slow on the legals. Not completely surprised on that because there's no contracts in place when we did the deal. This is a deal I did with a lot of other investors, and that's why we got the good price. Should be exchanging before Christmas. Seems pretty nailed on for that, so I'm fairly relaxed. And then completion will be late spring, so not too far away. Before we know it, Rob, the daffodils will be out and I'll be getting a tenant in.
Sounds like a good one. Sounds like a fairly low stress one with lots of upside. So yeah, looks like a good deal to me.
Well, let's continue on that roll, Rob, and tell us about your deal. Oh, not.
Yeah, when we planned this episode, I was like, oh yeah, I've got this deal I can talk about. Turns out I don't. This is the way to find the upside. There's more lessons to take when things don't go as planned as when they do. And so plenty of lessons in this one. So this is a 2-bed flat that I was looking at in Salford. We talk about Manchester a lot, And because I am greedy, I'm always looking for a good yield now with the potential of capital uplift. And I was targeting Salford for this because at the moment the prices are still relatively low, but there's so much investment going on, both in Salford itself and in Manchester. And there's such great transport links and infrastructure into Manchester that it's hard to see how prices aren't going to go up. And in this particular location, it was about a 10-minute walk from the BBC and everything else that's going on there. So it seemed like a nice, really easy hold. Put a couple of professional sharers in there, or maybe a couple. Leave it. It looks after itself, low maintenance, and you look around in 10 years and it's worth a heck of a lot more because of all the general things that have gone on in the area. It was an ex-council flat, and I've got a thing for ex-council flats. I really like them. And
You do? You really like them?
I do. They're great. They're big, they're solid, they're low maintenance. The service charges are generally really good. Importantly, this is like the really nicely maintained low-rise local authority rather than the big, horrible concrete high-rises. But this one, it was gated. It had really nice gardens. One of those things where you can just tell by walking around that it's owner-occupiers. They're looking after it nicely. It's not got a load of crap in all the front gardens and things like that. So it seemed to me like a really good one. The numbers were good, but not spectacular. So worth probably about 85k, possibly pushing it to 90. Got a purchase price agreed of 75, and it would rent for, I'd say 625. I actually think that you could get 650, and this particular one was already furnished. So I would have done it furnished, and I think would have got 650 for it, but call it 625. So a little bit of a discount, a decent yield, easy hold, potential for good uplift. What could go wrong?
I don't know, Rob. And funnily enough, you wouldn't tell me before the podcast, so I'm very interested to find out.
Well, what went wrong? Turns out that my love for council properties was the seeds of my downfall. The issue is that it had something called deck access. And if you haven't come across this before, basically what it means is that there is an outdoor communal balcony from which the properties are entered. So rather than walking down a corridor inside a building, you're walking down an outdoor corridor past other people's front doors. So you see this with loads of ex-council properties. I've got a couple that are deck access already, so I didn't really think anything of it. I knew in the back of my mind that it could be an issue, but to me it was just like a risk factor that can be bad news for mortgages if you combine it with other factors. So mortgage lenders don't like high rise, they don't like it when there are still a high proportion of social tenants. They don't like those factors, but then again, it depends on the value and the location as well. So if you've got a city centre location, then they'll take a view on that kind of thing. So in this particular development, it was low rise, it was in a good location, beautifully maintained, 100% privately owned. So I thought, okay, well, it's deck access. Who cares? But it was all those other factors are in place. My mortgage broker was not so sure. She was concerned about it and flagged this. So before I went any further with it, I went and I did a couple of things to try and reduce my risk. So I went onto the land registry and I downloaded the title plan for the whole building to validate that all the units were privately owned. I also downloaded the deeds for individual flats to show that some of them had mortgages on them. So they clearly weren't all unmortgageable. And I got my PA to call up a few different local agents and ask if any of them had issues because of mortgages falling through. And none of them reported any issues. So off the back of that, I thought, okay, well, it could be an issue, but I think it'll probably be okay. But because it's deck access, some lenders just flat out wouldn't look at it. So my broker placed me with a lender who is normally okay about these things. That, as a knock-on effect, meant that I had to switch solicitor because my normal solicitor wasn't on their panel. So that was a load of hassle around that. And then eventually, after a load of messing around, the valuer went out, they looked at it, and they said, oh, it's deck access. And because of that, and because you're only buying it for 75k, we're not willing to lend on it. which really annoyed me because it's like, why did you have to make me wait around and pay for a valuation when you knew that it was deck access because I told you, and you knew how much I was buying it for because I told you that as well. So that was...
Rob, issues with valuers, this is a new one.
Yeah. I know. So at this point, highly annoyed because it had been dragging on and I'd had all this messing around with it. And having gone to all the effort of choosing the right lender and really building the case and satisfying myself that there weren't any other risk factors, it still didn't get anywhere. So at this point, I had to decide what to do. So I wasn't in a position, because it'd been dragging on for such a long time, to start all over again with another mortgage application with like a commercial lender or something like that. So I was like, well, do I just go ahead and buy in cash? And I didn't. Now when I'm talking about it again, I'm talking myself back into it because it would have been so easy and the numbers are pretty good. The reason that I didn't buy in cash ultimately, because I thought, okay, if I buy in cash, I can just sort of sort out the mortgage in a year or something to get my money back out and then worry about it later. The reason why I didn't was because of the exit. So even though I'd probably be looking at holding on to it for a long time, and when I did exit, I'd be looking at selling to an owner-occupier who would have a far easier time of it mortgage-wise. I just didn't want to have a property that was potentially difficult to sell, just in case. And while the property was good and the numbers were good, they weren't outstanding. So had this been the absolute deal of the century, I would have gone ahead and bought in cash, put the exit to the back of my mind, thinking, well, it's probably not going to be something I want to do anyway, and I'm just going to sell to an owner-occupier. But because it was just good and not great, and I know that I can find plenty of other good that don't have these problems, I just decided on balance that it wasn't worth the risk.
I think you've been a little harsh on yourself with the numbers, Rob. I mean, I don't buy as counsellor, so I don't know what the returns are generally, but it seems like an attractive return. Yes, below market value. It wasn't, knock yourself down type of numbers, but still, you got yourself a deal, which is what we always talk about. It seemed like you did a lot leading up to this, right? You did a lot of research, you made a lot of checks, you made the calls, all the things we talk about. So is this a case of, hey, it's just one of those things? Sometimes these things happen, valuers can be funny, or do you look at it and go, actually, I can do this better next time, or I will do this better next time? It's interesting. It's sometimes there's loads of lessons to draw out of these situations, so sometimes it's hard to find them. But having analysed this now, what do you feel you've learned from it?
Well, the reason that it kind of annoyed me is that I think I did do a lot right. And I'd learnt lessons from things previously, which kind of made me realise things that could have been potential challenges. And I thought that I'd taken preemptive steps to address those. So it kind of bothers me because I thought that I'd learnt lessons already. The real lesson I think to take from it is to take broker advice first and never assume anything. So I thought it would all be okay and sort of went down and I sort of got the offer agreed before speaking to my broker. And then she said, oh, I think you're going to struggle with that. Funnily enough, she said that if it was worth $500,000 rather than 75k, it probably would have been all right because they would view that of less of a risk. Again, doesn't really make sense to me. If you think something's risky, you want to put more money into it. Seems weird. But the point is, that if I'd taken that advice first, it would have saved a lot of messing around. I wouldn't have put the offer in the first place. But then the flip side of that is you've got to be careful because brokers, and along with solicitors and everyone else, will often look for the negatives and tell you what not to do. And sometimes you can think that you can know better and see the positive side. So taking the appropriate advice at the start from professionals is the lesson, I think, from this, but caveated from the fact that sometimes you do have to take a risk. And I don't regret this one because I think if it had worked out, it would have worked out brilliantly. It didn't. So what have I lost? A little bit of time and a valuation fee. And so I don't think there's too much to cry about in there anyway.
No, I don't think so. I don't think you did a lot right. And as you said about brokers, a lot of brokers tell you what can't be done rather than finding what can be done. I'm not saying that about your specific broker, but I know from dealing with hundreds of transactions every year that I've seen brokers tell me what can't be done, and a broker working on the property next to it has made it happen. It's important that if people are listening to this and using their own brokers, sometimes maybe a second opinion may have been a route rather than your own research to get another broker possibly. But to be fair, Rob, you did more research than most would do, so I think you're a bit unlucky. And the mortgage company had given it a green light in terms of the criteria, so I do think you can't beat yourself up too much about that one. But the thing is, there's plenty more property fish in the sea. That's
exactly it. It's just one of those things, and these things do happen, and that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because, well, on the face of it, the story is like, guy thinks about buying a property, guy can't buy a property. That's not that exciting. But I think it is important because these things will happen. And if it happens with your first one, maybe you get really demoralized and it puts you off the whole endeavor. That would be the case for a lot of people. And so this is the whole point. It's like, these things do happen. If it happens on your first one, don't let that put you off, because there are happier stories out there. And that hopefully we're going to hear another one of those right now.
Well, hopefully this is the beginning of a journey, Rob. This is the beginning. So it's the lovely phase where it's the honeymoon period of the deal. So I'm all lovely and warm about this deal at the moment. We'll see in 3 or 4 months when we look back how it played out, and we'll definitely follow up on these episodes because I appreciate the 2 I'm talking about haven't completed yet. Like the previous one, and this one's come from R&P Property. Now, I mentioned that not as a sales plug, rather that I wanted to get out the way that this episode is not about, oh, look at these deals. You can't, if you're not an R&P client, well, the other one's sold out, and this one's going to be going to R&P clients, and you can't become one quick enough to get this one. So this is not a pitch for this deal. It's an education piece of what I've just done. So what have I done? Well, I've gone and got myself what I call like a crown jewel. So I look at the secondary stuff, and then I love my prime stuff as well. So I've got properties in really good areas, Chester, Leeds, some really nice areas of Manchester. But what I don't currently have in my portfolio is a prime London property. I've got South East, but prime London or prime Manchester, which we've talked about a few times over the last few weeks, seems to be the new London.
For a minute, I thought you actually were buying in London. I was ready to have a heart attack there. But yeah, you're right. We've been talking about this at the summits recently, and I think there are so many parallels. And we've said that although Birmingham is the official city centre, there are so many reasons why Manchester now feels like London did. And yeah, there are huge parallels, and it seems like there's loads and loads of potential in there.
So the place, I don't think I've got a better located property in my portfolio. For people who know Manchester, Piccadilly Gardens, it's next to, not half a mile down the road, it's the building next to Selfridges. For those who don't know Piccadilly Gardens and know London, think Oxford Street. Think where the Top Man is, or the Nike store, where that pedestrian area is. It's like there in Manchester. So you can't improve. It is an incredible location. And I am definitely going in for this for a capital growth play, because Manchester is already on the up. It's not one of these areas that I hope is going to start soon, a bit like Bradford. Manchester's already started to move, but only in the last couple of years. It's not like it's been going for a long time like London, and it's not been doing crazy numbers like London. But as we say, everybody seems to be... You look at the media now, every property story, pretty much, 80% of them at least, seems to be about Manchester, whether the city centre or the suburbs. So I'm super excited that I'm getting something so close to the centre. Value, this is a 2-bed, 2-bath. Layout is one of the best layouts I've seen. I've worked with this developer before. Rooftop garden, concierge, super spec. Value, easy, 250. Now, for those in London, you're thinking, I can't get a studio for that. And that's the point. It's got sort of London potential. Not saying it's going to go as high as London, but look at the value still that you can get, even at full value. The prime central area of Manchester, you can get a high-end luxury apartment for that sort of money. This isn't one of these schemes on the outskirts of the city that are priced high. This is if you're going to drop a pin in the middle of the city centre, this is on the pin. Purchase price, of course, I always want a deal, so I've got this at 225. So 10% off. In terms of percentage points, it's not knock you down number, but the pound notes value is significant. Rent, this isn't a ROI play like the last one. The rent's very, very conservatively, and this is off plan, but it's based on today's rents of $1,200. I could punch that up higher, but I want to play it safe. But there's plenty being let at that price and more. As I said, Rob, I see this one as a bit of a crown jewel in the portfolio, along with some other stuff I've got. Like the other stuff I've got in the city centres, in the luxury locations, if you like, the returns aren't spectacular. But what I've seen in those other locations that I've done this previously, I've more than made up for it in the capital growth.
Yeah, it's important to know why you're buying a property, and there are different reasons. There's nothing wrong with having a bit of a mix. Some people go out and buy exactly the same type of property in exactly the same location every time, and that's fine too. But the important thing is to know why you're buying it and not kid yourself. Like on this, you know that you're getting a reasonable yield, but not an amazing one. But that's what you want, and you're not going to be crying about that because it's hard to see how there's not going to be big capital growth over the next decade or so. And we were talking about locations before. I mean, Manchester is somewhere where, because of the way it's going, you probably could buy it in a more secondary location. And if it's the right type of property, then you'll see some uplift. But if you do go prime, then the whole thing is just supercharged. So yeah, as prime goes, that is about as prime as it gets.
It is, and we say this a lot, we talked about yield on the last two deals. Something we've said previously in the podcast, nobody's ever got rich through rent. The reason we go for the secondary areas is because of the uplift. Bradford, the prime central area of Bradford, so if Bradford goes, then it kicks on. Rob's deal is on the outskirts of Manchester, but Manchester's a very strong city in its own right, so the ripple effect will eventually go out there. And then you've got the city centres themselves, and if you can afford to get into them, there's still incredible value. I mean, as I said, you can't find a better location. It's Oxford Street of Manchester. The Piccadilly Gardens area in front of it is going under regen as well, which has been announced since I've got this one. So it's one I'm really excited about the potential of this one. Great to get a deal on it too. That's the cherry on the cake. The location, absolute bob on. And as you say, Rob, it's important to know what you want. What are you in it for? Some people have a scattergun approach. This may sound scattergun because these two deals are very different, but I have a very deliberate approach where I go prime and then secondary, prime and secondary. And in my funny little way, that's me spreading my risk. Different areas and different profiles helps me spread my risk.
Exactly. And you can do that. You cannot do that. You can buy all the same type of property, but the important thing is to know why you're buying it, why you've targeted a particular thing, and not be kidding yourself. So I've got properties where I only bought them because there was an opportunity to get them at a really good price, do a refurb and get all my money back out. So I did that, and I'm holding them and I'm getting a yield from them. They're never going to get any capital growth. I know that, but that's okay because I knew that going in. If I was buying on the assumption that, property doubles every 10 years and all property goes up in the same way, then I'd be crying in 10 years because they would have gone nowhere and your prime one in the centre of Manchester would have doubled at least. So it's just a case of knowing why you're doing it.
Exactly. And to draw lessons, it's hard at this stage because it's so early. But what I would say is patience. I watched a deal go by that I couldn't get involved in Manchester because I was buying my own place. And I found that really frustrating. But like we said before, Rob, there's plenty of property fish in the sea. And while I could have panicked, I waited. And now I've got something I'm ridiculously pleased about. But I had to wait. I was patient. And sometimes you just need to be patient. You might be more, okay, the right deal hasn't come along. The right deal hasn't come along. Don't panic and compromise. Go for what you believe in. Stick to your guns. I know that's sometimes hard, especially when you're keen. But the deals are out there if you're prepared to put the effort in as well. Patience and effort. But if you put the effort in and you have the patience, the right deals come along. And this is a really nice way to wrap up my property year to hopefully exchange on. And this one probably will be the new year when I exchange, but get the ball rolling on this one, exchange on the other one. And yeah, add to the snowball, as we say. So yeah, very pleased overall.
So there you go. Those are our latest property deals, or our latest property dealings, as one of them turned out not to be a deal after all. But I hope there are some useful lessons in there for you. And we're going to talk very shortly about a continuation of this that we're going to do in a couple of weeks' time, where we'd really like to have your input. But first, another area where we would like your input is, of course, the iTunes reviews.
Oh, yes. A huge round of applause, please, for the following two incredible individuals. So the first one's from PTD3000. I don't know if that's a robot or a human, but thank you either way. And PTD says, love them. I've listened to lots of them. These two are very motivating and they have cleared up a number of queries I had. Many thanks for keeping up the good work, chaps. Could I suggest an episode on finding builders to do renovations on properties where you live nowhere near? Many thanks. Good. We'll add that to the list, Rob. I think that's a good one. Or certainly an Ask Rob and Rob. We'll have a look at that one for you. And secondly, another short one from YPH 2016, which is possibly their robotic friend. And this says, there's a lot of advice out there on property, but this is a benchmark against all the other advice, judged by me at least. Always balanced and realistic, yet at the same time leaves you motivated and ready to take action. Thanks and keep up the good work. Well, thank you for your great work of leaving us reviews. It's very much appreciated. If you'd like to leave a review, please do. And if you haven't subscribed yet, maybe you've listened to a couple of these on the old internet, make sure you grab your phone, subscribe through one of the podcast apps, and you will get it delivered to you every single week. It's absolutely free, this podcast. Why would you not?
Yeah. People worry about automation and robots coming and stealing all our jobs. If robots leave us iTunes reviews, then they're very welcome as far as I'm concerned. Do get along and subscribe to the podcast. You get 2 doses of property information every week, and you also get every single week a resource. And you've got a really good one for us this week, Rob.
Well, I have, but it's not really from me. I have big thanks to Dale, who I've known for a long time, early listener to the Property Podcast, met up with him recently, and he recommended an app or a bank card. I can't quite decide what it is. They call themselves a bank anyway, called Monzo, Monzo. Very, very clever. Very impressed by this, actually. It's a bank/app where you get given a card, a bank card, like a normal bank card, and it pairs up with an app. You have to look at the website, which we'll link to in the show notes, because it is really, really impressive. But it breaks down where you spent your money, how you spent your money, the categories you spent your money, how much you spent this month, how much you've got left in the bank for the month. Really, really interesting. Rob, you've talked about monitoring spends before and being focused on where your money's going. I think there's one that might tempt you, possibly.
Yeah, this looks super cool. I'm just looking at the website now. Looks like it's good if you want to keep track of your spending, but also good if you just are a little bit geeky and want to be on the cutting edge of things for no particular reason. And I tick both those boxes, so I'll definitely be checking it out.
So as Rob mentioned, this isn't the end of looking at deals. We want to do something we've never done before, and we want to look at your deals live. Well, a live recording anyway. We would like you to submit the details of deals you're looking at right now, and we'll give our opinion on them, our verdict. So it's a chance to ask us, what do you think of this deal, Rob and Rob? Well, we'll tell you. And we're making it very simple too. Go to thepropertyhub.net/our deals, where you'll find this week's show notes. I'll also link to a cash flow of the first deal I've spoken about, just to give you reference, and you can see all the numbers and details. And we'll link to the resource of the week. So there's lots of reasons to go to the show notes this week, which is at thepropertyhub.net/our deals. But most importantly of all, if you go there, leave us your details, leave us the information about a deal you're looking at right now, and in a couple of weeks' time, we'll have a look at that deal live on the podcast and give you our verdict.
I'm really excited about that episode, but I'm also conscious that we'll need to block out probably a whole day to record it, because we're just going to be sort of looking at it, going on to Rightmove, digging into it. It's going to be the most fun to do, and also should be really useful. Not that our opinion is gospel or counts for everything, but it's always useful to have another opinion, and you'll get to see what kind of opportunities other people are looking at. And I think there's going to be a really nice range. So I'm very much looking forward to that. Thepropertyhub.net/our deals. Get over there, do it now before you forget. We'll be doing that in a couple of weeks' time. Next week, in the meantime, we're going to be talking about UK regeneration projects that you should be aware of. So if you don't have a deal that you're looking at yet and you're still scouting around for an investment location, you should find that one very useful indeed.
Yes, really important. We talked about a few areas today, and we've not invested there by chance. We know what's going on in both the secondary and the prime areas. We're not just investing there because we've read a news headline. We know what's happening. We know the regen projects involved. These can make a big difference to the capital growth uplift in these areas. So make sure you join us next week to give you some ideas and some knowledge on what's happening in and around the country and where you possibly should be considering investing next. So make sure you join us for that one. Should be very interesting. And Rob, I'll probably get to mention trains at some point, which is something I enjoy.
Excellent. Well, I can one-up that because I'm off to York to go to a train museum later today. So don't get too jealous. While I'm doing that, you should get over to the Property Hub. Recently redesigned, loads of cool stuff going on over there. And you should also tune in to Ask Rob and Rob on Tuesday for a double dose of property questions and answers. We will see you then. In the meantime, have a great week. Have fun. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.